Hey everybody, Coach Adam here with a quick review on type 1 and type 2 errors. What does this have to deal with? Well, we're going to be talking about how this impacts hypothesis testing. What is our hypothesis? That's our best guess that we think will happen in our study. Now, when we're looking at this, we're really going to devote it down to two different types of hypotheses. Number one, the first one's going to be the null. This is the statement of no differences. This is what we usually accept as the default. It's the status quo. And these are the types of hypotheses that can only be rejected. We're always going to be starting off with this null hypothesis. Now, on the contrary, we've got the alternative hypothesis. This is where we have a statement of differences if the null is false. This could be in a more positive way. This could be in a more negative way. When it comes down to it, it is different from the null hypothesis. Now, how do errors interact with this? Now, we've got two primary errors. We've got a type 1 and we got a type 2. The type 1 error is going to be where we reject the null hypothesis when it's actually true. We'll give you some examples later on in this presentation. A type 2 error is when we fail to reject the null hypothesis when it's actually false. Now, why is this interaction of errors important in hypothesis testing? Well, if we want to limit the amount of errors we make and the types of errors we make, we have to make sure that when we're doing our research design, we've got an adequate sample size and we make sure we set our alpha level low enough to avoid these chances of making errors. Now, as a quick review from last time is what is an alpha level and p-value, because these are going to interplay together to ensure that we're either accepting or rejecting the nulls. The alpha level is what represents the probability that us as the researchers will reject the null hypothesis when it's actually true. And what we've studied is that about 0.05 is usually the most common in our fields of study where we're at right now, which then translates to about, hey, this is going to be about a 5% chance of committing type 1 error. What's type 1 error? That's when we reject the null when it's actually true. Now, our p-value is going to tell us if there is evidence for or against the null hypothesis, and we're looking to see where that falls in this alpha level that we set at 0.05, either greater than or less than. So how does this tie into an example, let's say, from my field of work of sports psychology? Well, I want to conduct an experiment, and I want to see how is the impact of the sports psychology workshops, a whole series of them, what is the effect and the impact that that has on athlete attitudes towards sports psych consulting? Now, I just finished my proposal and I did an extensive review of literature, and I actually found that, hey, changing athlete attitudes can be pretty tough, can take a long time, and it might take a lot more than the time that I have within the framework that I can do it in. So I really don't think that's possible to change the athlete attitudes. That's going to be my null hypothesis. I'm going to say that, hey, there's going to be no significant mean difference, all right, between before and after these attitudes regarding sports psychology consulting. What's going to be my alternative hypotheses? I can have two of them. I could actually, hey, do my experiment. My athletes could have a more positive attitude. So that'll be my H1 towards sports psych consulting. And then I can have a more negative attitude, or my H2 hypothesis towards sports psych consulting. So right here, I've got my null. There's no difference. Or maybe there is going to be some differences. How do these work together? Now, hey, guess what? Let's say I actually do the example. I do the experiment. I work with the intervention. I give the workshops, and I find a significant mean difference. All right, my significance was less than 0.05. There was a major shift in attitudes. Let's say they were more positive. I'm feeling great about this, so how do I report that? Now, this is an easy chart. I love that actually helps me out and remember how this all works. So let's take a look at this in the context of my example. If my null is false, all right, which is exactly what happened, and I rejected it, I'm in great shape. So I said my null was going to be there's no difference. Turns out there was. So I reject the null. I did not commit any types of errors. Now, if my null was true and there was no difference, and I failed to reject the null, so I accepted it, again, I'm still in great shape. But what happens when the null is true, so there was no significant mean difference in attitudes, and I rejected it? That's what's a type 1 error. So if the null was true, there was no significant mean difference, I'm going to reject the null. That's a type 1 error. What's a type 2 error? That's when the null is false, so there was an effect, and I failed to reject that. That's going to be a type 2 error. So hopefully in this chart you can see that, hey, it can be easy to make these errors, but it really comes down to a proper research design. And when you analyze your data, make sure you're taking all the necessary steps to set you up for success. Thanks.